Okay, so welcome to Beyond Awareness, our action and prevention series in honor of Sexual Assault Awareness and Sexual Violence Prevention Months during April and May. If you missed any of the previous sessions, you can go to our YouTube. The link to that will be put in the chat right now, and you can check out all the past recordings of past subjects that we covered. And we did just want to acknowledge that some of this content may be negatively activating for folks, and we did want to put the self-care resources in the chat. So if you need to leave and take care of yourself at any time, please feel free to do that. You can also message myself, Daniela, Trish, or Erica. We are all educators at sexual violence prevention centers, and one of us will be able to help you out. So who we are by now, I'm Natalie. I'm a sexual violence prevention education coordinator at Amelia Rising, and today joining me are Trish, Erica, and Daniela, and I will let them introduce themselves if they want to.
Sure, I can go first. My name's Trish. I'm the public education coordinator and a counselor at the Sexual Assault Center in Sarnia-Lambton. And again, I've been co-facilitating this with Natalie since the beginning of the month, and it's been fantastic. At our agency, we have prevention and awareness workshops, education around sexual violence, consent, healthy relationships, as well as counseling for anyone over the age of 16 who has had any form of any experience with any form of sexual violence.
I'll just quickly go next. I'm Daniela. I am new to this, 3 weeks in now. I'm Natalie's, partner in the Sexual Violence Prevention Education Coordination at Amelia Rising. And I am really excited with how this seminar series has gone down, and I'm really glad that we have Trish and Erica here to help us as well.
Okay, so at Amelia Rising, we offer tools to help people ages 12 and up we offer tools to help people ages 12 and up to have healthier and safer relationships. And we offer free counseling for people who did not have their consent respected. So if you'd like more information on our services, you can find us on social media or visit our website. I think Trish went over what they offer in Sarnia-Lambton when she was introducing herself. So I will move on to the land acknowledgement.
Sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. So as usual, Amelia Rising and North Bay rests on the traditional Anishinaabe territory of the Nipissing and Doki's First Nations, and this territory is covered by the Robinson, Huron, and Upper Canada treaties.
And Sexual Assault Sarnia rests on the traditional part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. But this is referred collectively as the Anishinaabe.
And we are putting a website in the chat, and we invite you to view the traditional lands and treaty you are currently on, and what that means for you in the fight against sexual violence and gender-based violence. It's nativeland.ca. And we can't talk about violence, we can't talk about bystander intervention without acknowledging the violence that is continually committed against the land, against Indigenous people, especially Indigenous women and girls, through abuses of state power, colonial rule, and settler violence, resulting in intergenerational trauma and harm. And we also recognize that these conversations can have negative activators. We would like to share a resource that offers free chat counseling available 24/7 for Indigenous folks called Hope for Wellness. And we do want to talk again about this beautiful artwork from the Land Body Defense. They created an amazing report called Violence on the Land, Violence on Our Bodies. And we are going to put their website and stuff in the chat, or someone already has. And in reference to this art piece, it says, this system is inherently heteropatriarchal as it correlates ownership to power. Slavery, rape, and loss of land are all a result of a culture that has no respect for consent and bodily autonomy as it relates to self-determination and empowerment. So essentially what happens to the land happens to the people. And I think bystander intervention is a good way that we can look at how we are being active accomplices and allies to the Indigenous folks that we're living alongside in this country. And with further ado, we can talk about workshop goals and agenda.
Awesome. Excuse me. So, pardon. When we look at our workshop goals today, talking about bystander intervention, the first one is to stop. We want to stop the cycle of violence by learning and implementing bystander intervention techniques and overcoming barriers to interventions and why people don't intervene. Number two, we want to learn support. So supporting survivors the way they need and want to be supported after an intervention happens. And number three, we want to connect. We want to connect survivors to support and crisis service if that's what they wish. So after our goals, we're going to look at the agenda today. It's a really good agenda today. We have introduction and icebreakers, goals, disrupting the cycle of sexual violence and gender-based violence, who is a bystander, bystander effects and the barriers, intervention strategies, scenarios, and velour. So it looks like a lot on today's agenda, but it's all really great information, and it's fairly interactive with some nice videos in there too.
Thanks, Trish. And we can get it started with this TikTok from RAIN, which is an American organization that's done a lot of great work in this field. And we can just look at that right now. It is fun because bystander intervention is actually, like, there's evidence to support that bystander intervention actually does work when it is practiced, and it can actually help prevent sexual assault and violence by stopping the cycle. So how do we disrupt the cycle? And I know that some of you may recognize this pyramid from one of our other presentations, and remember that it's less of like a hierarchy and more of like a building blocks. One thing allows for the next thing. And remember that disrupting the cycle starts at the bottom of the pyramid. When we take away the main building blocks to violence, such as stopping the use of sexist, homophobic, transphobic jokes, problematic language, and sexual objectification, we can prevent further things from happening. And remember that violence exists on a continuum. No form of violence is better or worse than another. And for that reason, disrupting the cycle of violence means not only intervening in physical altercations, but also intervening at the bottom of the pyramid and working upwards. But with that being said, we do want to look at why people don't intervene. And I think, many of us have been in situations where we knew the violence, we know violence is bad, we know verbal assault, verbal abuse is bad. So why do most of us freeze or walk away when it comes to intervening? Well, this phenomenon is called the bystander effect. And there's lots of articles that kind of talk about scenarios where this has happened. And these articles you can actually gain access to if you email me for the slides. But on the next slide, we are going to watch a video about, the bystander effect. And it's actually a pretty good one. It's from Soul Pancake.
If a stranger needed help, how long would it take you to offer them a hand? According to psychology, the answer to that question may depend less on who you are as a person and more on how many people are with you at the time. In a strange paradox of human nature, the more people there are in a group, the less likely anyone is to offer help. It's called the bystander effect, and it may be a roadblock that's keeping you from showing empathy. When someone is in need, people in large groups tend to feel that they don't need to do anything because someone else will take care of it. This is known as the diffusion of responsibility. The end result is nobody does anything. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you. We started with a large group of 10 people and told them they were here today to see a product demonstration. So we're just basically looking for emotional reactions to certain products. We're not quite ready to go yet. So as you can see, you have these surveys. Go ahead, start filling them out. Take all the time you need with them. I am gonna go get the product and just kind of start throwing it together, and then we're gonna begin. Sound good, everyone?
Okay.
Cool, thanks. Here's the thing though. Everybody but one of these people wasn't in on it. We gave her a 10-minute window where she could offer to help. Let's see if she comes to my rescue. We repeated this a few more times with varying results. Come on. That didn't sound good. Ugh. Next, we tried it with a group of 5. Oh, jeez.
Do you think you're allowed to do that?
So far, it's not looking good for people in general. Are we just plain unhelpful, or is there something to the bystander effect? To find out, let's see how helpful people are when they're all by themselves.
Hi.
The results? With our group of 10 people, it took our participants an average of 8 minutes and 1 second before they lent a hand. Excuse me, thank you.
Can I help? I just feel
Thanks.
bad.
Participants in our groups of 5 were a little quicker, saving me from the tent with an average time of 7 minutes and 25 seconds. I'm okay.
Do you help?
Do you want to give me a hand?
Yeah.
That'd be great, thank you.
What can I do?
But when our participants were by themselves, that is when they really shined. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. On average, they offered to step in just 3 minutes and 19 seconds. You were the fastest by a country mile. I have set this thing up by myself 7 times today.
That makes me sad.
You took a total of 12 seconds. Why do you think you were so quick to do it?
I like to help in any way that I can.
That's the funny thing about the bystander effect. You would think that a group with more people would mean there's a higher chance someone would do something. But people in a group are actually less likely to help.
I knew I should have just stood up and done it, but then a big part of me wanted to see what these people would do, and I was just kind of like, are any of them gonna help?
At first, I was a little shy to jump in and help, but then after a while, just like, I'm just gonna jump in and help.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Sorry it took 8 minutes.
When it's just the two of us in a space, there's like a bond that's created that's like, well, I'm not gonna let you struggle on your own. And I think if there is a group of people, it's way more acceptable for me to be doing that.
It's the diffusion of responsibility.
I think that's totally true.
If something is saying jump in and offer to help, just follow that intuition. Even if no one else is saying anything, just, hey, if you can be a part of helping someone, instead of just watching them struggle, or even take out your cell phone and like tape it or something like that, which is the worst, just offer some help.
So, now that you know about the bystander effect, ask yourself, how often do you feel like you should help someone, but don't, because you think somebody else will do it? Maybe next time, you will be that somebody.
So pancake.
Love that video. Something that stands out to me is when the one guy just said, like, follow your intuition. Like, if you have that feeling, like, jump in and help someone. I love that. So, let me see.
Yes, me too. And I think like that it's interesting that, the more people that are around, the less likely somebody is to intervene. But, the minute that you're like alone or in a smaller group of people are more likely to step forward.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I think it was in October. I know this is not Canadian based, but in Philadelphia on the train, when there was a sexual assault, so many people, that bystander effect happened. Like, people weren't intervening. It went on for a long period of time. People had their phones out. So I thought that was a really good, interesting point to look at a workshop on, like, okay, why is that happening and how can we prevent that? So looking at some barriers, like in the video, we face many barriers when deciding to intervene in a situation. And I know I can think back to times where I've probably seen something that I should have intervened on and haven't. I'm not going to beat myself up for that, but I'm going to learn from it instead. We could unknowingly be running through a series of questions in our head to assess, do we intervene? So we're looking at what is happening, who is involved, who is around watching, are there other people that can step in? Where am I? Is this somewhere I feel safe to intervene? That's really important too. When is this happening? Do I have the time to intervene? Because there's follow-up with that. And is it my responsibility? And I know a lot of times when you look at maybe even just like intimate partner violence, say you're in college and you're on campus and you see a couple arguing and it looks heated and one looks kind of like blocking the other, and you think, okay, it's not really my responsibility at this point. It's something that's personal that they'll work through. We look at why or why not, and how can I intervene? So depending on the who, what, when, where, why, and how, that can all affect our ability to intervene or not to intervene, especially when faced with other barriers or challenges related to safety, security, access, and support. Natalie, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
I think that like safety is a good point. I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed sometimes when they're looking at a really intense situation. And they may actually, I think a lot of people freeze. I think that, we may have all heard of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses. And I think that a a lot of folks freeze. I know that in situations, a reason I may not have intervened is because I froze. And you know, like, again, I'm not gonna, just like you, I'm not gonna beat myself up over that. But it's something I just need to be aware of. And so I think it's, you know, fear and like overwhelm and people just like maybe not feeling capable to do, to be an active bystander.
So before we go deeper into how to intervene, I think that we need to acknowledge that we all have a role to play when it comes to bystander intervention. Whether we notice it or not, in any circumstance where intervention is needed in relation to sexual violence prevention, there will be a person in distress. There will be a perpetrator of harm, and most often there's at least one witness. Witnesses may choose to be passive, and that's what we would call a bystander, or be active in the situation, which is what we label as an upstander. Witnesses may be present before or leading up to the harm, during the harm, or after the harm. We will provide information, intervention strategies that can be used at any point before, during, or after. Knowing that we all have responsibility and role to intervene is important because it helps us avoid self-talk such as someone else will step in, or, you know, I'm not the victim, it's not my business. Those thoughts that hinder us from taking action. But before we move to the next slide, we're going to look at another quick TikTok to review the different roles.
Sexual violence is preventable, and you can have a role in preventing it. Remember the Steubenville case? That's a great question. So what is a bystander? Bystanders can be present when the abuse is occurring, or they can witness circumstances that lead up to these crimes. It's also really important to understand why bystanders don't step in. Some bystanders don't feel equipped to know what to do or say. It means you have to confront something that you're witnessing, and confrontation can be difficult. Some other people think, well, it's not my business, or maybe someone else will step in. So to combat inaction, we must equip people to have awareness about what is appropriate and what is not. We must feel a sense of responsibility that will give us confidence to confront. And we must understand that our action or inaction have great consequences that can either be helpful or harmful. If you've ever intervened, I want to hear about it. Ask questions, like, and follow me for more prevention tips.
Perfect. So now that we've established,
okay, I'm going to talk about something I've been seeing on social media a lot.
So we've established that there's two ways to be a witness to harm. So either passively as a bystander or actively as an upstander. We'd like to review the process of intervention now. In other words, the thought process we unconsciously go through before deciding to make an intervention. The intervention process helps us determine whether we will decide to intervene or not to. And now I think we do have another TikTok to play.
Yeah, so I think just like to also to point out what's on the slide, there are a few steps here, such as like noticing the incident, which could be like a gut feeling. Is it an emergency? So that involves a level of like risk assessment. Is this responsibility? Is this my responsibility or someone else's? What can I do? And then acting and being an upstander. And this TikTok will sort of go through those things as well.
Lately, like when you see videos of people getting kidnapped for those social experiments, and then like crowds are standing around and they watch and maybe even laugh and they point and stare, but they don't do anything to help. And you probably think to yourself, if I was there, I would do something. Why aren't they doing anything? So in the 1960s, psychologists John Darley and Bibb Latane actually did research on this very subject. And they came up with 5 steps that we all go through when we are deciding whether or not we are going to help. Step 1, we must notice the incident. Step 2, we must determine whether this incident is an emergency that requires help. Step 3, we must feel responsible to help. And if there are a lot of people around, we might feel like someone else is going to do it. Step 4, we have to know what we're going to do to help. And step 5, we actually have to help. That's why it takes so long.
So that TikTok I like because it goes through all those steps. But once we've discovered a scenario that requires intervention and we've documented some important details such as the who, I'm a bit ahead. So we like to use the Ds of intervention to help remember and normalize the steps of intervention. We actually already covered the first 2 Ds of intervention on the past slide. They are interchangeable, discover and document. We might already do these unconsciously. However, it's helpful to remember them as parts of the intervention process. Discovering is when we identify or discover that a situation requires intervention. We are noticing and assessing risk. Documenting is when we continue to evaluate the situation. We may decide that taking mental or physical notes to be values such as writing down the date, time, description of a person, or a license plate number. And now, once we have discovered the scenario that requires the intervention, we've documented the important details such as the who, what, when, where, we can decide the best way to intervene. And so delegating the intervention responsibilities to someone else might be the most appropriate option if we are not equipped to handle the situation, or we may delegate someone else to get support, such as calling a crisis hotline. Delegating is useful when we are not sure how to intervene, if we do not have time to do a full intervention, or if we don't feel safe intervening. Delegating can look like telling a teacher, manager, or a parent about harm happening. Delegating can be useful in situations where we are not familiar with people involved or the situation. And there is also distract. So sometimes we can take our intervention a step further by distracting the perpetrator. This might look like asking the person a question, pointing them in a new direction, or diffusing the situation by changing the subject. Distracting can also look like giving the victimized person a way out, such as saying, oh, hey, like, come help me in the kitchen with something, or did you happen to finish that report the boss wanted? This allows the victim to step outside the situation with you. Distracting is a good method to temporarily diffuse a situation indirectly. Trish, did you have anything to say on these 2 methods?
I think that when I first went over the information, like when I started doing bystander intervention and I looked at delegating, some people think that it's kind of like just sort of passing the buck or passing it on, but I think it's important to recognize when you need resources and who those resources are and kind of surround yourself with that, because a lot of times, like, we want to help, we want to fix, but we can't do everything. And especially if we need to look at like our own safety and the risk situation or the risk of the situation that's happening. Sometimes delegating is the way to go. And then also with distracting, sometimes you do not want to have a conversation with anyone who's like perpetrating. So taking the victim away from the situation somehow with any distraction is excellent.
So in certain situations, we may need to take a more direct approach to intervention. This also depends on our comfortability with the situation, if we know the victim or the perpetrator, if we're in public or private, and many other factors. If we feel safe and comfortable directly intervening with the situation, we might make a calm, non-judgmental statement that lets the perpetrator know that what they're doing is not okay. Comments such as like, hey bud, knock it off, that's not cool. Or I know you're trying to be funny, but it's making people uncomfortable. Can you stop? I know that there can be so much pressure to not be the person to call out a joke when everybody's like laughing or when somebody else thinks that they're being funny. But as we know, jokes are part of the pyramid of harm. So it's important to also avoid further escalating the situation. And we will also want to be mindful not to embarrass, shame, or blame the victim, which is why anything that's coming out like might have to be more calm and neutral, as previously stated. But in all situations, we highly recommend utilizing the last D of intervention, which is delay. Delaying means that maybe you were not able to intervene initially, but you were able to check in with the survivor afterwards. This might sound like saying, hey, I saw or heard what happened earlier. It wasn't okay. It wasn't your fault. Do you want to talk about it? Either way, I'm here for you. Delaying intervention might also look like confronting the perpetrator later as well, if you're comfortable with doing that. A similar statement of, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I saw or heard what you did. It wasn't okay or consensual. It made me feel uncomfortable knowing that happened and that it hurt someone else. It would be respectful if you didn't do that again to anyone else. After any of the other intervention methods, such as delegate, distract, or being direct, it is encouraged to follow up with the victimized person and offer similar delayed responses, such as, hey, I saw that was happening earlier and I tried to stop it by distracting, X person by asking the teacher to step in. I just came to check in on you to see if you're okay or want to talk about it. Our final webinar next week will dive deeper into how you can support your friends or family after an intervention or a disclosure. And then we're going to talk a bit about street harassment.
So sometimes when we talk about bystander intervention, we picture it as a grand gesture that is stopping a violent behavior. However, sometimes our intervention may be something as simple as striking up a conversation with someone who's clearly being harassed by someone else on the public transit or while at the gym or anywhere in public. So we would like to play this quick video from L'Oreal Paris in partnership with Hollaback that demonstrates how we can intervene in everyday situations that often go ignored. So we're going to play this.
We see it happen everywhere, at any time.
78% of women have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces.
Like a suggestive comment,
a sexually explicit touch,
an inappropriate gesture,
or being followed. And it threatens our self-worth.
It takes over who we are.
We see it happen, but stay cautiously silent and uncomfortably look away.
Maybe because we don't know what to do.
How to help.
Or how to combat the situation.
I said I'm fine, so don't bother me.
The time has come to keep our heads up and to stand up for each other against street harassment.
And everyone can be part of the solution.
Sorry, I'm gonna pay for it.
Excuse me. Is this yours?
Can you help me, please? I'm looking for this direction.
L'Oreal Paris and the nonprofit organization Hollaback have joined forces to teach men and women how to combat sexual harassment in public spaces with simple but impactful actions. Take a stand and learn how to combat street harassment at standup.l'orealparis.com, because we are all worth it.
And then just a little, a couple stats. In 2019, a survey was conducted in 8 countries, and 78% of the 15,500 women interviewed claimed to have been harassed at least once, and only 25% said someone intervened. So those are, to me, pretty alarming numbers. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on the video or on those stats at all right now.
You can feel free to put any thoughts you may have in the chat or in the anonymous Q&A box. And we can just give you a minute to think, but also like I can share my thoughts. To me, like all of those situations seemed very like familiar. And I know like that I had never really thought until a couple of years ago about how aware I am of myself when I'm like walking down the street because of, you know, having experienced street harassment before. I honestly don't know anybody, like any woman that hasn't experienced that. It's such like a normalized part on TikTok and Instagram, like social media. There's lots of examples of women at the gym just trying to work out and like men like staring at them instead of just like doing what they're going to do. I know that it can be an uncomfortable environment for lots of women and non-binary folks for that matter. Anyone who is like perceived as a woman sort of gets this treatment. And I just wonder like what it could have been like, you know, if we had had this knowledge before.
Yeah, I think too, when you look at statistics, if you know a perpetrator of someone who's like street harassing or saying inappropriate jokes or something, if a peer calls them out on it, they're more likely to be like, oh, whoa, and kind of like put in their spot, and they're more likely to not continue that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But I do also recognize it's really hard to call out a peer on those actions.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have scenarios that Daniela is going to take us through.
Yeah, so we're gonna do a little scenario exercise now. When I get into each of the scenarios, you can feel free to participate in the chat or through the anonymous Q&A section if you do have anything that you might like to contribute. So this exercise is going to be a bit of an opportunity for us to apply what we've just learned through the seminar to 3 hypothetical scenarios from the Draw the Line interactive campaign. So each of these scenarios explores instances where we can consider why we should or shouldn't draw the line, when to do so, who it's happening to, and how we could intervene as bystanders. So now I will move into the scenarios and we can see how you may intervene. And just like a little reminder to try and formulate any answers using the Ds of intervention or any other strategies we've talked about today. So this first scenario reads, you hear your boss tell a coworker how great her legs look in a skirt. Do you go back to your desk? So I will give it a couple minutes so we can consider like why we might intervene and how we would if we choose to do so. I think a good place to start will probably be like why we might intervene in this situation. And personally, like one idea that I would think is just about like sexual harassment rates in the workplace. And it's not just in any particular line of work, like it can be in the hospitality industry, it can be in an office, it can be like in a hospital setting, it can be in so many different areas. Rates of sexual harassment are extremely high. And like in this situation, if you do choose to just go back to your desk, we're choosing to look away and not intervene, and therefore we're helping to foster a more threatening and intimidating workplace that opens up the possibility for sexual harassment. So when it comes to options to intervene, how could we? On the spot right there, you could take a direct approach by calling out the boss for his comments and letting them know that you think that it is unacceptable. You can also take another approach and instead, I guess, delegate in a way, but it's also a bit of a direct approach where you could go to HR and you can tell them that there's no place for sexual violence in the workplace. And then another strategy would also be to check in with your coworker and see if they're okay and reassure her that that comment is inappropriate and has no place there. So in doing so, you are also kind of delegating maybe for them to go to HR themselves. And you can go as a team, kind of approach it together. So that's a couple examples for that scenario. And then we do have an answer in the chat. So that says that I think it would depend on the relationship between the coworker and the boss. If they were friends, perhaps it was a casual conversation. If not, and the coworker was clearly uncomfortable with it, I would probably join the conversation to steer it towards a casual conversation about fashion, to make it clear that it was heard and insert myself in the situation, and then check in with the coworker after. I think that that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I think that checking in with the coworker after is like, that's probably a really great step that we should kind of practice in kind of any bystander intervention. And then also delaying and steering the conversation in a different manner. And then still checking in with your coworker and then choosing to maybe take it to HR and just still reminding the boss that that isn't an appropriate comment. And then we can maybe move into the second scenario here. So this one says that a community helper has a reputation for being touchy. Do you say something? So again, I'll give everybody a couple minutes to kind of type up any answers you might have. Again, considering the who, the what, the where, and then the D's of intervention. So we can maybe now look at why we might intervene here. And I think an important thing to look at is the who. When we see that it's a community helper, maybe that's somebody that's trusted in the community, somebody who may be in a position of power or authority. So when somebody is in a position like that, there is no possibility of consent if there is somebody abusing a position of power. And that is sexual violence, that is sexual harassment. So I think that that is a really big why an intervention needs to happen in this situation. So again, a couple strategies that we've come up with and that come from the campaign itself. Again, the key thing is checking in with the person. So if you know that maybe somebody has said, oh, that this community helper was touchy with me, or somebody says that they were uncomfortable in the situation, or maybe you witnessed something yourself, always make sure that you're checking in with that person. And then you can either go to another peer, a parent, or a trusted community member. And then eventually, if there is the kind of initiation to do so, and you can take it to the authorities, especially if the person is under the age of 16, because we know that that is an abuse of power and authority there. So I'll give everybody a couple more minutes to see if they have anything they want to contribute. But I think that the key thing there is that this is somebody that is in a trusted position to like help out in the community. And we hear stories of this all the time. And this is something that that there has to be an intervention, knowing that this person's working in your community, maybe with youth, maybe with different populations. This is a key situation where intervention can really stop the cycle. So I'll give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll go into the third and final scenario. And I don't know if maybe Trish or Nat has something that they want to add to this. Maybe if there's a specific intervention strategy.
I think this is probably a rather difficult one for lots of people to conceptualize how they might do this. And I think in the past, just based on stories, like news stories we've heard, like lots of people don't know what to do when it turns out to be like a community helper, someone that's in the community. But you're right, they would be in a position of power. So I think that in this case, I would either delegate or use a direct approach. Like I might use delegate, direct, or delay. So like maybe delegate to somebody who is closer to that community helper, or, like take a direct approach, but definitely check in with the person afterward and ask them like how they're doing, if they feel uncomfortable. Trish, what do you?
I agree with all of that. And I recognize that when it's a community helper, it's very difficult. And you look at that power and that status that they have over the other person. So I would agree with that. I would definitely delay, like I would check in with the person for sure. But I think at some point, this is where advocacy might need to happen, and someone has to approach that community helper.
Yeah, absolutely. And like advocacy is a big part of like bystander intervention. And especially when it is, like if it is a community helper helping with like a vulnerable population, whether that be youth, sometimes you might not be in the best position. So if you can find somebody who will advocate for whoever has been impacted, is like a really important thing to do. So we can move on to the third scenario here. So this one reads that your sister tells you that her husband made her have sex last night. Do you change the subject? So this is now somebody that you have an extreme personal connection to. This is your sister. This is somebody close to you. Why should you intervene? Well, that could be one of the reasons right there, that this is somebody so close to you that there isn't that kind of question of responsibility. You might have that feeling that like, this is my sister, I need to step in here. I'm not going to change the subject. So why should we not look away? I feel like there's still this idea about like marital sexual assault that we need to get away from. Like, yes, that is her husband, but it is indeed still sexual violence. So by changing the subject, we're ignoring the sexual violence, and we make it easier for the perpetrator to continue that violence. So there's a couple different ways that we've drafted to maybe be able to intervene. If it is your sister, you might be able to take a more direct approach because you might have feel a little bit more comfortable in it. But like a key thing that we address kind of in all sexual violence is by supporting your sister and listening to that story, and reassuring her that you believe her, and validating her feelings and whatever else she might disclose to you. And then that also may extend to delegating some of the intervention to, whether that be a crisis line, any community resource, or any services, so that can either be kind of looking up to see if there is a sexual violence support center near you, and then kind of directing her that way, and then also offering to kind of keep with that direct approach and stick with her through the situation. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they might want to jump in, any other kind of strategies.
I personally, I don't think I would add to that. I just know having that like that, my sister is one of my best friends. So I almost even want to change her language in this. Like when she tells you her husband made her have sex last night, like, can you challenge that and let her know that that's actually a sexual assault in case she's not really even aware?
Absolutely. And I think that that's kind of contributes to like the validating her story as well. Like just being like this isn't okay. This is sexual violence. And kind of just reassuring her that you're going to be there for her, and that you believe her and that that's not okay. So yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the scenarios. I think we formulated some really good intervention strategies, kind of based on what we've learned in the presentation. I did really like the answers that we got in that first scenario. And I think that kind of doing scenarios like this is a great way to practice what we know. And we know that sexual violence is everybody's problem, which is why we need to continue to educate ourselves and practice these strategies, which is why I think that seminars like this are a great opportunity to continue to learn and practice those skills.
Thanks, Daniela. I thought that was a good exercise. And now we're just going to kind of summarize what we've been talking about in this presentation so far. So first is that violence varies. Sexual and gender-based violence exist on a continuum. No form of violence is better or worse than another. Understanding that violence can show up in different ways helps us destigmatize that there is only one way to be a survivor or victim. And that, based on the fact that violence varies, intervention varies. Depending on the situation, safety, risks, and our comfortability, there are several ways to get involved. Remember the D's of intervention: be safe, user supports, and empower others to intervene as well. Trust your gut. Oftentimes we ignore our gut feelings due to fear or uncertainty. But when something feels wrong or off, it's better to intervene and be wrong versus not intervening at all. And believe in support. Above all, always believe a survivor. There is literally nothing to be gained for a survivor to come forward based on how survivors are currently treated by society and the justice system. So if somebody is coming forward to you to tell you that something has happened, it's a very vulnerable thing to do. And the way that we can make it a safer, more accepting environment for people to come forward is to just always believe them. And ask what they need, or if they would like help finding supports. Do not assume that a person will respond the way you want them to or pressure them to report. But if they do want to report, then offering to help them with that could also be appreciated. And so with that, that brings us to our grounding activity. We have a video today. That's 1 minute, and so we can go through that now.
Welcome to the 1-minute grounding meditation. Let's begin by taking a seat with the feet on the ground. Take a moment to get comfortable and really settle in. And when you're ready, gently close the eyes. Feel the energy under your feet really root down into the earth and feel the support that it's giving back to you. Lengthen through the spine, through to the crown of the head. Soften the shoulders, relax the jaw. Take a deep breath in and feel your body move as you inhale. Allow the breath out to be long and notice the body as you exhale. Follow the breath in and out. If thoughts come, just notice them, let them be there and let them pass. No judgment. Just observing and bringing the focus back to the breath in the body. Focus on the belly as it expands and softens with each inhale and exhale. Just be aware of the breath in the body. You can continue your awareness of the breath in the body, or you can slow.
Okay, everyone, that brings us to the end of this week's session. Next week, we'll be supporting friends and family, where we will go more in depth on, kind of what to do once somebody has disclosed to you or has had a realization of what has happened. And also feel free to scan this QR code to do the survey and get your certificate, but we will also be putting those details in the chat. So I hope that you all have a good day and a good short week, and feel free to contact me or Trish if you need anything.
Thank you, everyone.